report that has been published by the European Court of Auditors, focusing very much, of course, on marine biodiversity, which is very timely looking at the discussions that we are having, both at the European level, having seen the biodiversity strategy being released by the European Commission last year, where also there is more and more specific attention for marine biodiversity. And as a parliament, as an ENV committee, we are working on an initiative report on the biodiversity strategy together with Agri and INTA. So we are working on that part. But of course, later on this year, there will also be international negotiations, probably in China, on the framework of the Convention for Biological Diversity, where also the issue of marine biodiversity will be addressed. I mean, I will not go into all the details, but I do think that it needs to be stressed that if we are looking at reports from, for example, the European Environment Agency, they are stressing time and time and again that the European seas cannot be considered healthy or clean, and that it's really that we are having problems in not meeting our targets, neither on halting biodiversity in marine areas or ending overfishing or achieving good environmental status, which was defined under the Marine Strategy for Framework Directive. So in that sense, all these issues together need to be addressed, and we are very happy to have a good report of the European Court of Auditors and looking forward to a very interesting exchange of views with the European Court of Auditors, the Commission, and on the joint leadership with you, Monica. So back to you.
Ganz herzlichen.
Thank you very much, dear Bas. I agree. This report is very interesting indeed. We're spending money. We want to make sure that that money is spent as it's intended to be spent. I would like to already apologise vis-à-vis members of the ECA. We've had some discussions, and of course we don't speak Portuguese, and therefore I would like to apologise if I might mispronounce your name. Mr. Figueiredo, I very much hope that you know that I am turning to you despite my appalling pronunciation. Welcome, and the floor is yours. Mr. Figueiredo.
You pronunciated it very well. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank both committees for inviting the court to make this presentation. I will do it respecting my time. So I will go to my presentation, my PowerPoint presentation. I will present, as you have already said, a report on marine environment, which we consider that the protection from the EU is wide but not deep. Next slide, please. The first question that I think that I must raise and give you an answer: why did we do this audit? And we have done it because the European Union has a policy of protecting the marine environment and using marine resources sustainably. And 2020, last year, was a key year for the EU in terms of meeting objectives for the marine environment. And this current year, 2021, we'll see a conference meeting on the United Nations Convention on Biodiversity, as the member of the ENV committee has already referred. The EU has a special role in the conservation of marine biological resources. For environmental policies, we must be aware that the Commission and Member States share responsibility. And we are also must highlight that the EU funding is spread over different funding instruments. Next slide, please. What was our audit scope and approach? We examined European Union policies to protect the marine environment with three main concerns. The first one about the EU policy framework. The second one to pay special attention to the situation in the Atlantic and in the Western Mediterranean. And finally, because this is a very important part for us here in the court, and I'm sure that also for the Parliament, how the EU funds are used with a specific purpose. Here in this map, you can see the geographical area that was in our audit scope and approach. Then the Western Mediterranean, the Iberian coast, and the Gulf of Biscay and also the Macaronesia. These were the seas that we were more attentive to. Next slide, please. What did we find? We found three main conclusions. The first one is that the European Union policy framework is in place, but it's very challenging to apply, very challenging to apply. The second general conclusion is that we see some progress in the Atlantic, but the Mediterranean presents a worse picture. And finally, we have seen that the European Union funds are little used for these purposes. I will speak a little bit more about each of these big conclusions. Next slide, please. In terms of the European Union policy framework, what we have seen is that the marine protected areas provide little protection, in our opinion. And we have said why we take this conclusion in the report. We also have seen that legal provisions to coordinate both policies related with the protection of the environment and policy related with fisheries, rarely are used. The legal provisions that can assure an adequate coordination between those two policies. Finally, we have seen that some threatened species are not protected. Next slide, please. In terms of results, we think that three main results we found. The first one is that the maximum sustainable yields, this is a very important concept for the protection of marine environment and also marine biodiversity, those yields targets are not met. Secondly, biodiversity loss has not halted. And finally, we have seen, we must say it, some signs of progress. In terms of the Atlantic Ocean, we consider that most of Atlantic catches are sustainably fished, concentrated in a few major fish stocks. However, there are many stocks overfished or stocks where the maximum sustainable yields advice is not available. In the Mediterranean, the situation is worse. We consider that the fishing is twice sustainable level. The catch data and effort monitoring is poor in the Mediterranean, and the fishing protected areas are not working, and the fleet overcapacity rules are not targeted. Next slide. This is the third main concern of our audit, about the funding. And here you have some data related with the European Maritime and Fisheries Fund used by the 4 visited member states by December 2019. And as you can see, those 4 states have consumed more than 1,000 million euros from the fund, but only 6%, as you can see on your right, only 6% of those funds were related with conservation measures. And if we have a closer look, we see that the limitation of the impact of fishing on the marine environment, it takes only 0.2% for the overall finance resources at disposal of these member states. Then our conclusion is that the fund is little used for conservation, even if we have seen several good examples. That means that the fund has sufficient flexibility and enough rules to allow the use of more funding for these purposes. Next slide, please. Based on our findings, we presented 3 recommendations. The first one, the recommendation that we addressed to the Commission, the first one, identify to regulatory and administrative changes necessary to protect sensitive species and habitats. This is the first recommendation. Next slide. Improving protection measures in the Mediterranean is the second recommendation we made. And finally, next slide please, increasing the potential of European Union funding because, as I have said already, we found good examples that could be repeated. Let me say finally that I am happy to say that the Commission has accepted all recommendations, and in this moment I want to thank the Commission services for all the cooperation they gave us in conducting this audit task. And I'm sure that we will have good news from the Commission services about several questions that we raised in this audit, namely related with funding, related with the Mediterranean Sea, related with the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, and also about the biodiversity strategy. Then I would like to repeat my thanks to the Commission services for all the work they have done with us, and we look forward to learning the actions the Commission will take to improve the marine environment, and our clear priority can be given to biodiversity policy in the new AMFF funding regulation. Let me say finally, final words. We saw also the report of the reporting member from Cont Committee, and myself, I consider it very comprehensive. It covers all the important things that are presented in our report. I understand that in that report, special attention is given to funding, but I think that some reference to the situation in the Mediterranean and also the need for protecting more species and habitats could also be reflected in that final document, preparatory document for the Cont to decide. But of course, it's up to the Cont Committee to decide what conclusions he wants to take. Thank you very much, Chair.
So, thank you very much. I think that the first round will go to the Commission, and I think that this special report is really quite interesting, but is giving not a very good picture of our policy. So, I would like to ask the Commission what the Commission intends to do. I think it's Miss Valerie Tanking or Veronica Manfredi. I don't know which one will be the first one. So, Veronica Manfredi?
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Honourable Member Hohlmeier, and good morning also to the co-chair, Mr. Eickhout, and very pleased also to meet, although at a distance, the European Court of Auditor member, Mr. Figueiredo. It's a pleasure to be with you all because I think that indeed we have been just presented a state of facts that we do not dispute. As the Honourable Member Figueiredo has just underlined, the Commission has accepted all the recommendations, so it is my turn maybe to put certain things in the right perspective. First of all, to repeat on behalf of the entire European Commission, we are today indeed here, in particular DG ENV and DG Mare, represented by our colleague Mr. Valerie Tanking, who has been following together with us very closely all the work around this report. we repeat our full commitment to protecting marine environment and managing marine resources sustainably. Therefore, we very much welcome both the audit report of the European Court of Auditors and also the rapporteur Marinescu. We also recognize that over the past year a lot has been achieved with a view to better protect the marine environment. In the ad hoc implementation report issued in June 2020 on the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, we have concluded, after thorough consultation with stakeholders, that clearly it is thanks to EU rules that now we know much more about the seas and oceans than we did before, and we have much better identified all the pressure that today are impacting it negatively. And this is crucial in order to go much more upstream and prevent a lot of problems at source. In this respect, I would like to underline that the Court of Auditors report has been focusing a lot on fishing, which is, of course, one of the main pressures on the marine environment. And whilst we agree with the rationale of that, we have to stress that fishing is, unfortunately, not the only pressure preventing us from achieving good environmental status across our seas and oceans. We should not underestimate the impact of pollution, non-indigenous species, agricultural impacts, just to mention a few. So we continue to remain convinced that only a very holistic approach, as the one that is underlying the old Green Deal strategy, will enable us to tackle pressures holistically, also realizing, if I may say, economic synergies and good socio-economic benefits in tackling them in a more holistic manner. And this is precisely, by the way, the approach which underpins the entire Marine Strategy Framework Directive. We do recognize that there is room for improvement, definitely, as highlighted by the European Court of Auditors. Because, in particular, for example, we see that there is potential for making much better use of relevant EU funding, including, of course, of MFAF. Here, may I say that we recognize and welcome the fact that the just adopted new MFAFs does enable us to put much more accent on a sustainable use of marine resources. The Commission will proactively raise in all its relevant meetings with the Member States the importance for them to make use of the part of money which is under shared management, which means under their primary responsibility, in a manner that really enables us to achieve also the biodiversity goals that we have given to ourselves, and which, as co-chair Eickhout was reminding us all at the beginning of this meeting, we will have to negotiate internationally in one of the milestone COP that is coming up, where I think the credibility of our action will be really put at stake. So we have hope to create an environment which will be really conducive to enhanced and different level of uptake by our member states of all the resources which are in their hands for a much more sustainable use of marine resources and more sustainable fishing practices. We will also take the recommendations on the EU's environmental policy into account in the context of the ongoing review of the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. I have the pleasure to announce you that just in a few weeks' time we plan to launch an open public consultation to basically engage with all relevant stakeholders in reviewing, if need, meaning assessing the evaluation, of course, coherence and relevance of the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. And in that context, we will certainly pay particular attention to some of the coherence aspects as to the difficulty of implementing part of this policy framework, which also the Court of Auditors has raised. We are in parallel progressing in our follow-up initiative linked to the implementation of the biodiversity strategy, with particular attention, of course, to the 2030 target of achieving 30% of our marine areas being truly protected. We are working hard in order to set nature restoration targets that should strengthen, amongst others, the protection, of course, of marine habitats and species, and we do believe that this all will concretely contribute to addressing some of the Court's recommendations. Now, in fine, I would like to indeed remind what has been also just stressed by the Honourable Member of the Court, notably that we have witnessed progress, indeed, in particular in the Atlantic, under the implementation of the common fisheries policies, where we saw that the situation of fish stocks did improve in recent years, but we also admit that when it comes to the Mediterranean Sea, considerable work has taken place, but more is needed, and we are working very closely with both Mediterranean member states and third countries that also play a role in this context to secure an improvement of the situation. Let me also tell you that we plan to publish in 2021 a bespoke action plan on the conservation of fishery resources and the protection of marine ecosystem. This is yet another initiative which has been announced in the biodiversity strategy that we trust will contribute to respond to the Court of Auditors recommendation. Many thanks, Honourable Chair.
Thank you very much. Next one is Ms. Valerie Tankink.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think Ms. Manfredi already gave the Commission input as a start. I'm happy to answer further questions. In terms of the DG Mare perspective, as already said, we are working very closely with DG Environment. For us, the big focus at the moment is to work with the Member States on the programming for the funding, really being sure that money is programmed in the right direction. And for the Mediterranean, to follow up on the MedFish Forever and the Sofia declarations to really be sure that we get further progress, because as it's said by the court, progress has been made, but it's far, far from where we should be. And so big efforts are being made there. Thank you.
Ich bedanke mich sehr herzlich.
Thank you very much. We've had a European fisheries policy for quite a long time. It's odd that we have still these problems. Now, Mr. Marinescu, you're the rapporteur for this special ECA report. Are you there? Could I just ask colleagues to raise a hand online if they wish to speak?
So?
Oh, you're in the dark.
I'm in the dark. That's it. I'm in the office, so I don't know how to do it.
You have to put the light on, then we see something of you. If not, you're the shadow man today.
Apologize.
Ah, that's nice.
Thank
see
you,
your face.
President, for your advice. Thank you very much. So, thank you very much for the presentations and also for the Commission intervention. I welcome, of course, the Court's special report and its findings, of course, and the Commission's readiness to implement the recommendations. I stress the importance of the objectives under the EU fisheries and environmental policies, and particularly those with regard to fishing protected areas. Calls on the Commission to further improve and strengthen links between policies and to direct actions towards more meaningful results, and in particular those with respect to the specific provisions on Article 11 of the CFP and Article 15 of the MSFD. I note that the EU fundings support marine environment protection through several instruments, but none is specific for marine protection. Warmly invites the Commission to explicitly report on total EU funding dedicated to the marine environment. I call on the Commission and Member States under shared responsibility to implement the good use of funds such as the EMFF, the LIFE and the Interreg programs supporting environmental projects and the common fisheries policies. Calls on the Commission and Member States to increase the potential of EU funding, especially with regard to EMFF on measures protecting the marine environment. And I note that the European Parliament report on the proposal for a regulation of the European Parliament of the Council, amending Council and amending another Council regulation of the European Parliament as regards fisheries control was adopted in the plenary on 10th of March of 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then we would have Pierre Galskind from... Yeah, chair of the PESH committee, yes. But he knows it. But he knows it that he's the chair of the committee. I'm absolutely sure that he knows it. Hi, Pierre.
Joyce says, Dankeschön. Bonjour, bonjour, Monica. Écoutez, merci.
Yes, I do know that. Thank you, Monica, for the invitation, and thank you for that reminder. I do indeed chair the Fisheries Committee from time to time, so let me say something in my capacity as chair and member of the Cont Committee. So thank you to the Commission and the Court of Auditors. When we look at the reports together with scientific reports, we can draw together some information, for example, that the North and the Atlantic is doing better in terms of marine resources, but there are still a lot of question marks about some issues like pollution, climate change, of course, and then of course there's the Mediterranean, which is in a very tricky spot indeed. There have been a number of scientific reports, but I think everyone agrees that fishing is the main pressure factor on the environment. I think that the report doesn't underline that enough, to my mind. We have a number of legislative text, the habitats, the birds directives, the marine strategy framework directive, the CFP, etc., etc. But work is done in silos, and when you try and answer some questions thinking in silos, then it doesn't work. You also have measures which are duplicated. Indeed, sometimes there's an exponential multiplication of measures. Not so long ago, we had a fleet reduction plan for the cod fleet. Cod is not disappearing just because of fisheries. Indeed, you could stop fishing and it wouldn't bring the cod back. Climate change means that cod won't survive. Cod can't survive in warmer waters. There's going to be a review of the CFP in the next few years, and perhaps we would be doing ourselves a favour if we took an integrated view of environmental, climate change, pollution and fisheries policies. That's in the Fisheries Committee. We're looking at a review in a global sense, and I think it would be useful to do that, because I don't think that in 2030 our environmental policies will have met their goals if we cannot think with joined up policy thinking. So those are the comments that I wanted to make. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you to the Commission, and thank you to the Court of Auditors for highlighting all of those points for us.
Merci bien, Pierre. Jetzt wäre...
Thank you, Pierre. Now, Karina Kretsu and then Bas again.
Thank you, Chair. I am here on behalf of Mrs. Grappini. Mrs. Grappini is the shadow rapporteur, but unfortunately she had a number of technical problems. She could not connect. She would like to thank the Audit Court for their activity for this very important report for biodiversity, for marine biodiversity. She also has a very high appreciation for Mr. Marinescu's work as a rapporteur. For S&D, this report is essential because it provides extended protection to the marine environment, but it is not deep enough. because it provides a critical overall view of the way the European money is spent on biodiversity and marine habitats. It concentrates on commercial fishing when the funds, and for the next perspective, one of the main instruments which is dedicated to fishing in the European Union will be voted in plenary during the second reading. Interinstitutional negotiation for the for some species in the Mediterranean for the tun are being developed for the tuna fish. I'm sorry. There are some presentations in the report like LIFE and Interreg which demonstrate that the instruments of the European Union do bring a real change in the protection of the marine environment. Nevertheless, the report has some negative findings, among which the general deterioration of marine biodiversity in European seas. There is a protection framework, but the actions of the European Union do not have a good impact. They are not sustainable, especially in the North Sea, and only very little of the European money is used in order to support the conservation of the marine environment. The member states, France, Spain, Portugal, have used 6% of their financing to have direct measures related to conservation and another 8% for indirect measures. There are very many legal provisions related to endangered species. They are more than 20 years old without taking into account the most recent scientific advice. Therefore, the protection measures are not really efficient. On behalf of Mrs. Graffini, I would like to say that the marine environment is not protected, although there are very many regulations which indicate a concerning trend. Thank you.
Herzlichen Dank, lieber.
Thank you very much. Bas, now over to you.
Du wärst mit der Wortmeldung für die.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we do this in a joint effort, right? So thanks very much, Monica. We will continue with Catch the Eye now. So this is also the last chance for all the members to really raise their hand in order to be able to ask questions, be it to the European Court of Auditors or to the Commission. I'll take next from Renew, Catherine Chabot.
Vous m'entendez? Oui.
No, excuse me, I already spoke
yes.
On behalf of
Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Thank you very much, Bas. Let me begin by thanking the Court of Auditors for this report. It brings up an issue that I've been thinking about for a very long time now. I'd like to make 2 or 3 comments. First of all, the question of the timing of the application of public policy. We have a marine strategy framework directive, but it's out of sync with the water directive. We have more cross-cutting measures. I hear that DG ENV is working together better with DG Mare, but I think it has to work together with DG Klima as well. I think that the implementation of public policy and the urgency of the situation are out of sync. I very much support the vision expressed by Starfish and the work done by Pascal Lamy, which talks about the hydrosphere. So a connection between water, land-based water, fresh water, and the oceans. I don't know if the Commission is going to offer its support to that programme or not, but I do support it. And then lastly, I also think it's very important that we act both collectively and take on our own individual responsibility. So I would suggest that as we negotiate the BBNG, biodiversity in the seas, I would ask DG Mare to support France's proposal, namely that the treaty's preamble includes mention of the oceans as a common good. It's not a legal concept, but it's a moral concept, that it's a common good, and this would help make it everybody aware of the fact that we are individually and collectively responsible for the well-being of our ecosystems. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Catherine. And then for ID, I have Aurélie Beigneux.
Please press the speak button.
Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Can you hear me, says the speaker? Yes, we can.
Merci.
Thank you. Our oceans and seas host a wealth of species and biodiversity, so we have to protect them both economically and environmentally. The maritime sector generates over 6 million jobs in Europe. Unfortunately, the seas are subject to human activities, and for too long these have been aggravated by globalization, which this Parliament seems to welcome every day. Pollution and overpopulation of invasive species have put a fragile balance out of whack. Unbridled free trade is leaving a destroyed ecosystem in the seas behind. However, huge ships are exploiting 89% of the resources in the Mediterranean. So this means that smaller boats and traditional fishermen can't survive given this absolutely unfair competition. Traditional fishing means local fishing. It means you need to have knowledge of a whole series of traditions. And we need to ensure our food sovereignty, and that includes food sovereignty for each country. Our fishers have increasingly strict quotas, but there are huge ships at the same time which are absolutely pillaging our seas. And so what is the Commission going to do to defend this sector, which is subject to increasingly restrictive requirements? I would also like to know the role of, or for you to recognise the role of free trade in the destruction of these environments, because it's this unbridled internationalism that is leading to the introduction. We need an integrated local approach which can put an end to this scourge. That's how we can have healthy and high quality marine ecosystems. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Aurélie. And last speaker for the Greens. And last speaker we have for the Greens over there in the room. The floor is yours, Grace O'Sullivan.
Thank you, Bas, and thank you to Mr. Figueira for the presentation today. It was very concerning, and I think it's a real pity that the Fisheries Committee did not agree to co-host this hearing, given the ongoing debates in PESH on marine protection, fisheries control and climate change. And I believe this highlights disjointed policy making in fisheries, which is often separated from environmental protection, climate action, despite being directly linked. So how can we change this paradigm? I suggest we start here in the European Parliament by increasing the contact between ENV and PESH committees, given that our work is interconnected and intertwined. And we need to break this silo mentality when it comes to protection of marine resources. As highlighted in the report, despite numerous legal commitments, development goals and ambitious promises, the EU has failed to stop overfishing, tackle overcapacity in our fleet, or alter the way we fish to any significant extent. Every year, EU ministers meet to listen to the scientific advice and set fishing quotas. And every year, however, they set those quotas above maximum sustainable yield. There are some improvements overall, we heard that, but in terms of biodiversity loss, we continue to fish beyond the planetary boundaries. And the report notes the existence of an effective fisheries control system that it's a critical element for sustainable fisheries. We have the legislation. Unfortunately, it's simply not been enforced. And in a recent file in the PESH committee and in plenary, we fought hard to introduce more effective control system, but we faced an uphill battle. How can we better support our colleagues in the European Fisheries Control Agency and in local authorities to implement and enforce the fisheries control system? So finally, I look forward to the implementation of the provisions of the biodiversity strategy and in particular the establishment of marine protected areas. And I hope to see the EU leading in this area. And in Ireland in particular, we would like to take lead on this as guardian of the ocean, of the Atlantic Ocean. However, if we continue as we have been doing so far, in 10 years' time, we will be left with more good legislation, but very little progress made. So we need action, and we need action now, and we need not to be waiting for another 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that concludes our round of questions for Catch the Eye. And I would like to give the floor now back to Mr. João Figueiredo from the European Court of Auditors to reply to some of the questions that have been asked. And of course, any point that you would further on would like to make. So, João, you have the floor again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that we heard several very interesting interventions. I must thank you for the reference you made to the work done by the court. I think that really I didn't hear concrete questions that I must answer. However, I would like to make some considerations based in your interventions. I fully agree with the holistic approach, using the words of Veronica Manfredi, or the integrated view that was referred by Pierre Carlos Kind. I think that the holistic approach, that integrated view, it's very important to avoid also the silos that were referred to by several members of the parliament. But even if we agree with that holistic approach, I think that really we must give special attention to the questions of fisheries, because it's widely recognized that fisheries are one of the main key pressures on the marine environment. Of course, pollution is very important. Of course, climate change is very important. And it's very important to have that holistic approach, but we must see in concrete terms several questions, and in those several questions, the questions of overfishing is really a very important issue to address. And it's important to make this holistic approach, because also oceans and seas are global. And of course, there is space for local interventions. There is space for national interventions, but a European approach, global and without silos, is very important. I consider that. Finally, I am happy to recognize that the Commission has said, and I agree with them, that lots of work has already been done. But there are lots of work to be done more, if I can say so. And I was happy to hear from our colleagues from the Commission that they are aware, they recognize that now they know much better what the situation is, what are the most important problems they are identified, and we heard several initiatives they will take in the near future to address those problems. Then I think that also with the new MFF and also with the top-up given by the Next Generation EU for this concrete area, I think we will have enough resources, and if we if we manage and if we challenge member states to address better these questions, and with some political will from European Union institutions, namely the legislator, I think that the situation will improve. It is already improving, but it will improve in the future, hopefully. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And then we also give the floor to the European Commission again. I propose we do it in the reversed order as we did with the initial comments. So that would mean first Valerie Tanking from DG PECH.
Thank you very much. I thought actually Ms. Manfredi would speak first, but very good. In terms of the fisheries world, we already mentioned it, and several mentioned it here also in the room, that we need to find a way to work closer together. We see that at all levels, and I'm also very happy to hear the mention of further work in the Parliament between the committees. We're doing the same in the Commission between the different DGs, and it's not just DG Environment and DG Mare, but also DG Klima, and for example also the colleagues working on research and working on Horizon. There was a mention of starfish, and we all know that there's a lot also about the data and further knowledge that we need to work on. So work is ongoing there. We're also trying to see with the member states to have to help break the silo approach in the member states. When it comes to the fisheries policy, of course, we are in an area of exclusive competence, common policy, so a lot is in our hands. For the environmental side, that's slightly different. What we are doing concretely, some of that was already mentioned, and I'm not going to go in all the details today, but for us, this year is very important, first of all, for the programming under the fund. So that is something we're doing closely with member states. We prepared last autumn what we call a sea basin analysis, which really lays down where we see the specific challenges in each specific sea basin. And now we are following that up with the member states to really see how can they best target their the funding, and how can they program the money so that we reach what have been said. Of course, the MFAF is not the only fund that is there. We're also looking together with the other colleagues and services in the Commission what else can be done in terms of supporting the policy. In terms of the Mediterranean, which is a big area mentioned in the recommendations, there we are, of course, far behind compared to the other sea basins. At the same time, good progress has been made in the last few years. We have now the first multi-annual plan for the Western Mediterranean, and last year's December Council on the fishing opportunities has been a big step towards getting concrete decisions on how we can reduce fishing effort. At the same time, that's only one part of the Mediterranean, and it's also clear that we are far there from reaching the objectives. What is happening this year is later this year, a big part concerns, of course, what we are doing at international level, and we have the decisions on the strategy for the GFCM, so the General Commission for the Mediterranean. We've seen over the last few years, and for that also we have the MedFish Forever declaration and the Sofia declarations, that for the Mediterranean we can only get there if we get the other partners on board. We are only one part of the sea basin, and to make real progress for the stocks and for the areas and the marine environment as a whole, we need the other side of the sea basin to be on board. So discussions have started on the next strategy for the GFCM, and the Commission is really putting a focus there to make sure that the objectives we've set internally also come through there. That comes with looking at the fishing pressure, but also for how we deal with the impact on the environment, so the impact on the habitats, the impact on sensitive species, to see that concrete progress is made. For the remainder, when it comes to the other sea basins, we have in the decisions we have the objective of MSY 2020, and we've seen in the recent decisions of the Fisheries Council that we managed to maintain those. But as already mentioned in the room as well, there is a challenge because we don't have advice on all the stocks. So for some, we are still in a precautionary approach. But there, I would just like to underline that also for our commissioner, it's been a key issue for this last December Council to make sure that even where we don't have all the elements and where the advice is precautionary, that we insist on ambitious decisions that really make a change. For the remainder, I'll pass to Ms. Manfredi for the environmental side of things. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And indeed, for the final words of the European Commission, I give the floor now to Veronica Manfredi.
Well, now it should work. Many thanks indeed. There is little I can say to complement what Valeria has already so eloquently spelled out. Maybe just to say that we also all believe very much in the fact that what can get measured gets better done. And this is very much the logic also that underpins the 8th Environmental Action Programme, which is composed of the Biodiversity Monitoring Framework, the upcoming Zero Pollution Monitoring Framework, the Monitoring Framework for Better Circular Economy, and Monitoring Framework for both climate mitigation and adaptation. Tracking and taking stock of how much we are improving and getting there where we want to be will be the key of success. So may I say that I am thankful in advance to the co-legislators and clearly here today to the European Parliament for supporting us in getting there. It's a lot of work. Some of you have mentioned how many different pieces of acquis we already manage, and I think it's high time that we pull the strings and look holistically at how to achieve this further progress. Also to say that I very much sympathize with some remark in particular from Honourable Member O'Sullivan when she said that, also the European Parliament can really help us a lot by putting pressure, also in the capitals, because the problem is very often there. Ministries who do not even speak to each other. Count on us to continue pushing for transforming the mindset, but each of you back home with your constituencies, with your contacts, and also here from Brussels together organizing high-level conference and events can help us accelerate the implementation. Thank you very much for having given us the opportunity today.
And thank you very much. That concludes this session. So I would say, Monica, you have the honor to conclude and open up the new session.
So I conclude now. Thank you very much, dear Bas. We have finalized now our item 53. Now we are coming to the item 54, if I find it. That's the ECA Review 01.